Some closure on this series on solar flares. We didn't have another X-class solar flare overnight, so I'm going to try to wrap this series of blogs up for now. However, don't be surprised if another one pops up. The solar influx, sunshine. Each day on the quiet sun, it changes our psyche, our self, but gradually. We never really notice it. But intense solar change, like we get with these recent strong solar flares, injects change into our mind stream in quantum leaps that cannot easily be assimilated. So we tend to notice this level of change, but we may not have identified it properly. Some of your comments tell me that you're still looking for change outside of yourself, when I keep pointing out that with solar flares, it always is our own self that is changing. And who is there to monitor that? It would be me, myself, and I only. I've repeatedly pointed out, and this should tell you something, that with huge events like solar flares, we all experience, everyone on Earth, experience them at the same moment of time. They're not spread out or happening in this country and not in that country. The entire Earth takes it all at once. If we blink, we all blink together. Perhaps like the ostrich, everyone sticks their heads in the sand at the same time. We close our eyes. We wait out the shock wave of change, and then all together we open back up again. Now, I've seen this happen. One thing is certain, there's very little acknowledgement of all that we share in common. And there's much more interest in how each of us is distinct, preferably unique. That's what's called our self-interest. The symphony of life is conducted and articulated by the sun, by solar change, with long adagios on days with a quiet sun, but with prestissimo during times like these of intense solar bursts. In a way, our self is like those lovely sea anemones. You see them in the movies and stuff, moving slowly in time to the currents of the ocean, but also, when disturbed, infolding their tentacles all the way inside and hiding, and then slowly opening back out again, gradually extending their tentacles fully as things calm down. And it would seem almost by necessity that we all do this together, perhaps in harmony, wide-eyed creatures that we are, winking and blinking in the night of time. Our collective selves is the secret garden of consensus dictated by convention and then carefully pruned by our experience. I could go on with this theme, but it might be more useful to focus on how the self changes us in real time. With the quiet sun, left to our own devices, each of us will do what we want, including indulge ourselves and all of our hopes and dreams, whatever we've got stuffed away in there. It's easy. We build sandcastles in the air and we polish the patina of our appearance until it shines and glows. At these times, all is right with the world, hopefully. But then comes a time like this one, a time of intense solar change, intense solar bursts and activity. Despite our best attempts at self-control, what we know and what we call ourself undergoes sudden change. And it's a change that's almost impossible for us to ignore. Now, I'm not talking about crashing glass and shifting mountains. That would be external change. Instead, here we need to look at internal change. And that means a change in the shrine of ourself that we've built. And almost by definition, that may be a little harder to see, or we may just successfully ignore it, which is what we mostly do. We look for changes in ourselves, but at the same time, that is just what's changing. Especially who it is that is doing this looking at the self. So there's at least some recursion here, and most likely the makings of a full catch-22, the chicken and the egg. Looking at the self, looking at the self, looking at the self. We are approaching a logical impossibility, and at the same time perhaps moving beyond time and beyond credulity, our own credulity. Now, of course, this may be the very best moment for insight, the best moment for breakthroughs as to the nature of what the mind is about. And my point here is that intense solar change disrupts our orderly self and all the horses it rode in on. It takes the shine and polish off whatever we've been polishing, and it immediately rearranges the deck chairs of the self, despite any attempts on our part to prevent it. It reshuffles our deck and lays out a new deal. So, I guess the question is, how can we know this? Well, for one, we can check how we feel. Do you feel like doing what you were just recently doing, like yesterday? We all have to do our homework. The self always seeks to regroup. But when major change intervenes, something is inevitably lost. Now, our actual talents will always reappear, just like perennials come up each spring. But some of our pipe dreams, some of our wishful thinking, tend to be aborted and lost to us at these times. We may wake up without the usual inspiration to pursue certain of our life directions. They're just dead in the water, while others are still with us. And then new ones appear. At these times of intense change, we don't quite know who we are for a time. Our self has changed and simply reorganized itself. So we don't look outside ourselves, and we don't look intellectually at our carefully manicured spiritual concoctions. Instead, what we do, we simply rest and observe or see how we feel and what we feel like doing. Perhaps we take an inventory of projects and find that we no longer need to, or we no longer feel like doing some of them. This is a good thing to check. And the smart money is on just dropping those directions that have dropped themselves, and instead checking to see what we really do feel like doing. What we truly want to do will always be in there somewhere, if we can just wait and let the waters clear. So, as mentioned, the self is changeable, and solar flares bring change in huge quantities, and that amounts to a rearrangement of our priorities. Just think about that. I have more or less learned not to cry and not to moan when some desired direction that I was building suddenly comes up empty or void. I no longer endlessly force myself to start it up again as I used to, but now I just say, oh well, and I turn to those things that I do feel like doing. You could say that I am on call by change and not ashamed of it. How easy is this? Well, it's not always that easy. I have learned to have some patience with sorting out the self after it rearranges itself when change comes. To make this clear, remember in your life when something really catastrophic happened to you, like the death of someone close to you. What happened to yourself then? Did you find that you suddenly lost your appetite for certain things? Perhaps enjoyed being alone more than usual, took long walks all by yourself, looked out the window at nothing at all? Hopefully you get the idea. These are signs of extreme change. When the self is vacated, when it just goes empty, that fact alone is proof that the self is really nothing all that important to us. We find that we can drop whole avenues of interest in a moment, just gone. We just don't feel like that anymore. We're on vacation, vacated, like it or not. This is one way to measure change if we'll be observant. So with that in mind, turn your attention to what happens to you during an intense solar experience, and check your priorities. See what you really feel like doing and what you don't feel like doing, and what has changed. Inventory that, and then do what you feel like, and don't push what you no longer feel like, no matter how important it once seemed. I guess the old adage is, go with the flow. At least that's what I do. I'm doing my best to put this into words. More than that, I cannot do.